Well, so why doesn't Trump have the presidency right now? About what I was explaining before. So let me share with you. Votes for Biden were sitting inside these mail-in ballots that hadn't been fully counted in some states on election night. So for the last few days, these votes have been counted by hand, one by one, and the process is a slow one. But slowly, Biden's votes have been trickling in, and Trump's lead has been getting smaller and smaller, which many think will eventually evaporate and give Biden the presidency, with the exception of Arizona, where Trump's slowly gaining ground. So the entire world is waiting for basically 4 states, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, to finish their counting so we can know who will be the next president. Of course, Trump is not going to admit defeat without a fight. He's been on Twitter constantly calling fraud. He's now starting to make lawsuits in the courts, even though there is almost no evidence at all of fraud happening anywhere in the country. Also, at 2:30 in the morning on Wednesday morning of election night, he made a speech at the White House in front of his supporters where he declared victory with absolutely no idea that he was going to win, basically undermining the democratic institutions in the process. He has asked the courts to order the election officials to stop counting the votes, but the counting is still taking place. At any moment, the news organizations can have enough data to say who has won. And so we wait. But Mexico, the US is supposed to be the example of a strong democracy? Really? Is that what we're experiencing? But now the presidential election wasn't the only election happening. The entire House of Representatives, 1/3 of the Senate, and most state houses were being contested on Tuesday. Democrats expected a huge blue wave and win in a landslide that did not happen. Actually, the Republicans gained seats in the House, and control of the Senate will most likely not be decided until January, but it is going to be an uphill battle for the party. With how the country is going, with more than 20% of all the world's COVID cases, and all of the other crazy things that has happened in the past 4 years, this is shocking. The polls did not predict this. And now as election data and exit polling is coming in, political analysts are trying to make sense of what happened. And as we've been reporting on the Gringo Show for at least the past month, a lot of what happened came down to the Latino vote. Latinos voted in overwhelmingly larger numbers for Donald Trump in 2020 than they did for him in 2016. And this is proving to be the difference in states like Nevada, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. Let's talk about Texas in particular and the Rio Grande Valley where McAllen is located. You know, the place where Regios go, buy crap for $5 and stuff it in the cars to hope they get past the inspection station on the border, bring it back to Monterrey, and poof, a Mexican city that looks and feels like Texas. Before you get mad at me, Regios, remember flour tortillas are kind of American, right? Don't get me wrong. I love them and I prefer them, but they're just not authentically Mexican. So let's go to Starr County, Texas, where I used to live, which actually is the closest town to Monterrey. In the 2016 election, voters chose Hillary Clinton by a 60% margin. In this election, the margin for Biden was just 5 points. This is insane. And the trend happened all over the country. Biden was expected to win Florida. But in Miami, Latinos, Cubans, who usually vote Republican, but also Colombians, Venezuelans, even Puerto Ricans, went out in droves to support Donald Trump. The margin of victory was so low for Biden that he didn't get enough votes to put him over the top in the Sunshine State. We brought a number of analysts to the show to try to explain what was happening. This was anticipated, and there's so much to say about the Democratic Party taking Latino votes for granted, and people decided to take a stand. When we interviewed a Starr County resident on the show a few weeks ago, he had shared that his local leaders have let him down, and he was tired of it. Also, check this out.
So down here, we've been a one-party system. In the Rio Grande Valley, it's been a one-party system since Reconstruction, and the local party that is in charge has not been held accountable.
The local party has not been accountable, right? It's kind of interesting. Also, there's been widespread reports of a disinformation campaign in Spanish in a coordinated effort by possibly the Trump campaign, and also reports of the Russians getting involved as well. Virtually nothing was discussed in the campaign about Mexico, the relationship, what would be done. And Trump was particularly quiet the entire cycle. And except he invited President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to the White House over the summer. It was not enough to just have outreach or ads in Spanish. Voters felt neglected, and we're going to talk about this a lot in the coming weeks. But for more on this and more analysis of the election, we bring in member of the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations and frequent guest on the show, my favorite, Agustin Barrios Gomez, is with us. Agustin, how are you doing today?
Hey, Dan, great to see you.
Agustin, what happened with Latinos? And I know you're saying that it's not just Latino, because Latino is a big swath, but the different groups of Latinos, because it seems that not only did they have an effect on the presidential election, potentially giving a big win to the man who disparaged them, takes a hard line on immigration, has policies to put Latino children in cages, forces people to live in slums on the border, and scares the bejesus out of suburban white people in 2018 with these migrant caravans. I can continue the whole damn night about this, yet he won their votes. Explain to me why he won their votes.
Well, to begin with, there's no such thing as the Latino vote. I think that Cuban Americans have been very, very different in all of their voting patterns since forever, because their ideas, I mean, their entire litmus test voting is based completely on politics in Cuba and what the different parties have with respect to Cuba, and that's all they vote for. And in this case, the Republicans were very effective. They went on Cuban radio in Miami, and they said that Biden was the candidate of Castro-Chavismo, and they said that basically Biden would take the United States the way that of the countries that they left. So it wasn't just the Cubans, but it was also the Venezuelans. So I don't think in this case you can really talk about the Latino vote. Now, you mentioned Starr County. I'll mention Zapata County. Zapata County, right on the border, which is a county that was actually represented by Senator Lloyd Benson. That was where he was from. He was from Zapata County, and he represented Texas many years, including when he was a candidate for vice president of the United States and for the Democrats. And Zapata County actually went for Donald John Trump. So a lot of very weird things happened on election day, and even though I think that there were a lot of very motivated Democratic voters, there seems to be a legion, an entire army of Republican voters that went out on election day in greater numbers than anybody had told the pollsters, who were basically wrong about pretty much everything, or at least everything that counts. So I think that those are the key things. Now, having said that, go over to California, and of course the Mexican American vote, which is very important there. Obviously, that went to the Democrats, and I think one of the points that was being made also was the fact that you've got a very large part of the Latino electorate, non-Cuban, of course, that is actually very young. And these are the people who are coming in to vote. And that's sort of the sleeping giant. Out of the entire, what is usually called the Latino vote, it is actually the youth vote that is the sleeping giant, because they are by far the largest minority in the United States in terms of Generation Z. And so that's when you're really going to see that difference kick in. But as for the Cubans, the old Cubans, they're still, they see the Democrats as socialist, and they want to run from them as fast as possible.
Right, and of course Trump did a lot of policies. This time, of course, there was an approval of aid for the Puerto Ricans, and he approved it just recently. The Cubans also, in his hardline stance against Castro, stopped Obama's policies. I mean, yep. And of course, his hardline on Maduro in Venezuela, even though they didn't overthrow him or do anything. And some people are saying that he didn't.
Economic sanctions.
That still is, but he didn't, because it still is a wedge issue that they really care about. So it seems like he was really doing that, but it doesn't seem like the right policies.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, no, I think that, look, it makes perfect sense. I mean, and the person that had been working for him, the person had been working for the president in the area of Latinos, actually left that position in 2018, and he was very forthright. He said everything that we did, every policy that was made with respect to Latin America specifically, not Mexico, because Mexico is not really a part of Latin America. It's intermestic. It's something much bigger and much different. But what usually is thought of as Latin America, especially places like Venezuela, everything that they did was just keeping in mind re-election, and that that was said by a former staffer. So you got to take him at his word, right?
Great. So let's talk more about the election. I know we had a little chat before this is going on, and you don't believe this is over. I think a lot of Democrats are pretty excited about this. They think that this is it. That Biden is now within 1,900 votes of overtaking Donald Trump in Georgia, about 30,000 votes in Pennsylvania. It seems like that he's really coming in, but you're not so confident about that. Is that correct?
I think we have to be very, very, very careful with what's going on right now. Everything's on a knife edge. People's, the people are on the street. The current president of the United States is basically saying that the whole thing was a fraud. No, I would reserve my judgment until the states have actually declared the winner on their end. And remember that there's a very large process that goes on behind the scenes from November 3rd all the way through to January 20th. And there's a lot of things that still need to happen. You can imagine there being competing delegations arriving from the states to the House of Representatives. You can imagine all sorts of stuff going on. I would certainly not, by any stretch of the imagination, say that this is anywhere near over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering if the Republicans will finally have this thing that they can abandon Trump because they know that, he's almost out. And it seems like that there are a lot of Republicans that are not gravitating towards him right now. And hopefully that would be it, that people would choose democracy over trying to be with somebody that is trying to take over power.
Well, we'll see. Up until November 3, it was very much his party and his party alone. The Republican Party doesn't really exist anymore. It's now a cult of personality, and that personality is Donald John Trump. I wouldn't underestimate what they could still do.
You're a former diputado, a former congressman here in Mexico. You've been involved in Mexican politics. I know you're not involved right now, but what is going on in Mexico? Is just kind of a wait and see things? Are there stuff happening behind the scenes in operation in preparing for what is about to happen?
Well, I mean, two things. One, I would actually highlight, and this is very important because I think Liliana was very gracious in talking about American democracy, but I actually would say that the United States has a lot to learn about holding an election from Mexico. The INE is one of the best organizations of its kind in the world. The results are in practically immediately. It's a federal election. It's one person, one vote. Unlike all of these, very baroque systems of channeling votes through states and through the Electoral College. So I would actually highlight the fact that Mexico has an incredible system, and it's worth every penny. It is a very expensive system, but it's a system that really has kept politicians honest.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it seems like that Mexico election system runs so much smoother, so much better, and it's a popular vote. I mean, it seems like that
much more professional.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
no, it's actually the most sophisticated electoral system in the world. I analyzed it, and in fact, when the Americans were doing the first elections in Iraq, they asked the then IFE to help them with that, and that's why, I don't know if you remember those images with the indelible ink and all of that. That was all Mexican. That was all Mexican technology. That was all Mexican design. Why? Because we created a system that was based on mistrust. And so, everything is done based on redundancy, and it's done based on a random selection of 2 million normal everyday citizens who are trained before election day to actually run the elections. It's a spectacular system, and it's worth the billions of dollars that we've spent behind it. We need to protect it.
That's great. Well, maybe Mexico needs to teach the U.S. a thing or two, and I'm disappointed that there wasn't a huge Democratic sweep, because that's when change happens, when you have a full control. And it seems like that we're not going to know that until January.
Biden was up by 3.5 million in the popular vote the last I checked.
4 million, just surpassed 4 million tonight. It's
there you
pretty
go.
fascinating that Donald Trump can still win. But
That's a
Agustin,
lot of
I always
votes.
love having you on the show. Agustin Barrios Gomez, member of the Mexican Council on Foreign Relations.
Thanks,
Good
Dan.
friend. I know you're in the middle of nowhere, so I appreciate you coming out. And
I appreciate it, Dan. Take care.
Thanks.